Officer Jake Monroe had patrolled the east side of Austin 100 times, but something about this night felt wrong. It was past midnight when the dispatch call came in. Suspicious vehicle parked near an abandoned textile warehouse off Carson Drive. He could hear the dispatcher's hesitation. It wasn't just any vehicle. The report said it had been sitting there, engine off, for nearly an hour. No lights, no movement. A local dog walker had seen it and called it in. Jake arrived quietly, headlights off, coasting the final 50 feet. The warehouse stood like a skeleton against the moonlight, its windows long shattered, its metal siding rusted from decades of rain and neglect. The vehicle in question, a black Toyota Highlander, sat half swallowed by shadows, backed up to the side gate. Its plates were missing. That alone made Jake's stomach twist. He approached carefully, hand on his holster. As he neared the rear passenger door, he heard it, a sharp, muffled whine, then scratching. He froze, heart hammering. Someone was inside. He yanked the door open. At first, all he saw was fur. A large German shepherd lunged toward him, not in attack, but in protection. The dog's eyes burned with something raw, fear, loyalty, fury. It didn't bite. It didn't bark. It simply stood in the gap between Jake and the back seat, refusing to move. Then Jake saw him. Curled in the corner, clinging to the shepherd's side like a shadow, was a small boy. Filthy, shaking, no older than 5. His clothes were torn, knees scraped, and his cheeks streaked with dried tears and soot. His lips didn't move. Not a sound came from him. "Hey, buddy," Jake said gently, kneeling. "My name's Jake. I'm a police officer. You're safe now." The boy didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just clutched a handful of the dog's thick neck fur tighter. The German shepherd stayed between them, unblinking, like a sentinel from some forgotten war. Jake slowly reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Monroe. I've got a male child approximately 5 years old, conscious but unresponsive. He's accompanied by a German shepherd, no visible collar. We're going to need medical and child services on site. Copy?" The next morning, Jake Monroe stood in the hallway of the pediatric floor, staring through the glass into room 214. The boy was awake, sitting up, eating Cheerios from a hospital tray with his left hand, while his right remained firmly tangled in Rex's fur. No one else could get close, not even nurses. Rex watched them all, his eyes calm but alert, the kind of stillness that made grown men pause. Jake knocked gently on the glass, then pushed the door open with a cautious smile. "Hey, champ, mind some company?" Rex gave a slow wag of his tail. The boy didn't flinch. Jake pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. "Doctor says you're doing better, that you might get out of here soon." Silence. "Thing is, nobody knows your name yet." Jake continued. "We checked every missing child report. Nothing matches. No one's come forward." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, plush German shepherd toy. "I figured if you're hanging tight with RX, maybe you'd like a little backup." He set the toy beside the tray. The boy's eyes flicked toward it, then to Jake. Still nothing. Rex shifted and laid his head on the boy's lap. His gaze stayed fixed on Jake. "Is Rex your dog?" Jake asked. This time, a flicker of emotion passed across the boy's face. Something like uncertainty. Maybe fear. "You don't have to say anything." Jake added softly, "But if there's someone you're scared of, we'll protect you." I promise outside the room, Dr. Carter joined Jake as he stepped out. "He trusts the dog more than people," she said quietly. "That tells us a lot." Jake nodded. "There's trauma there, something bad?" "We've scheduled a child psychologist. She's flying in from Dallas this afternoon. We're going to try animal-assisted sessions." With REX, Jake exhaled slowly. "That dog's doing more for that boy than any of us can." Later that day, the psychologist arrived. Dr. Natalie Chen, sharp-eyed but warm-voiced. Her background in trauma therapy with animal-assisted recovery had turned heads in law enforcement circles. She entered the room alone, no clipboard, no white coat. Just jeans, a hoodie, and a gentle demeanor. She sat on the floor. Rex approached first, sniffed her hand, then returned to the boy's side. "That's a good sign," Jake said through the observation window. Natalie opened a small bag and pulled out several laminated cards. Pictures, people, objects, feelings. She placed them on the floor. "Do any of these feel like you?" she asked the boy. He looked. Slowly, his eyes lingered on one, a picture of a house on fire. Natalie didn't flinch. She replaced the card and added another, a picture of a man with a belt raised. The boy looked away. Then something unexpected happened. Rex moved forward, nose bumping the card gently. Natalie looked at Jake through the window. "That's not a coincidence." They repeated the exercise with more cards. A dark basement, a locked door, a screaming face. Rex reacted to nearly every one. Jake leaned in. "That dog's a witness." "More than that," Natalie replied. "He's a lifeline." The session ended, but progress had been made. The boy still hadn't spoken again, but the way he tracked Rex's movements, the way his breathing slowed when RX curled beside him, it told them everything they needed to know. Later that evening, Jake stopped by the room once more. A nurse handed him a drawing the boy had made. It was crude but clear, a child, a dog, and a burning building. Above it, scribbled with a red crayon, one word. J-A-Y. Jake stepped into the room, holding the paper. "Is this your name?" The boy looked up, then down, then back at R-E-X. After a beat, he nodded once. "Jay," Jake repeated. "That's a good name." Jake crouched beside the bed, eye level with him. "We're going to figure this out, Jay. I swear it." Jay said nothing, but for the first time since he was found, he didn't look afraid. He looked ready. Jake stood to leave. As he reached the door, Jay's voice came again, barely above a whisper. "Rex, saved me." Jake froze. So did Natalie outside the room. He turned slowly, blinking against the sudden sting in his eyes. "He did, Jay," Jake said softly. He really did. The following morning, Jay was gone. Nurse Felicia had entered room 214 at dawn, only to find the bed empty and Rex's leash dragging behind an open door. No signs of struggle, no signs of where they'd gone. Just the faint scent of disinfectant and Cheerios. By 6:45 a.m., Officer Jake Monroe had every patrol unit canvassing the neighborhood. Helicopters weren't called in yet. The department wanted to keep it quiet. Jake stood in the hallway, jaw clenched, replaying every possibility in his mind. "Security footage?" he barked. "Reviewing now," said Officer DeWitt, rushing up with a tablet. "This is from the north stairwell camera." Jake watched as grainy black and white footage revealed a small figure, Jay, sneaking down the corridor in a hoodie 3 sizes too big. REX padded silently beside him. "No adult with them?" Jake asked. DeWitt shook his head. "Nope, just the kid and the dog." Jake's heart dropped. Why would Jay run? The only theory that made sense was fear. Maybe someone was still out there, someone he was afraid would find him, and now he was running straight toward danger. "Check traffic cams," Jake said. "Check every back alley and side street from here to the foothills. If he's trying to go back, he'll take the path he remembers." "Back where?" DeWitt asked. Jake didn't answer. He already had a gut feeling. They found the first clue at an abandoned mini-mart just past Route 12. A shattered vending machine, dog tracks in the dirt, and a single crayon, red, wedged between the sidewalk cracks. Jay's color. Rex's leash had been left there too, deliberately draped across a broken milk crate. "It's like he wanted us to follow him," Jake muttered. That afternoon, Jake returned to the station and pulled the incident report from the night they found Jay, cross-referencing the time, the area, the calls. One address popped up: 1938 Cactus Lane. A fire report, domestic disturbance. No one had checked it out thoroughly. Jake stared at it. Something in his chest twisted. "REX," he whispered. "You knew, didn't you?" Rex barked once from beside his desk. Jake didn't wait. He jumped in his cruiser and hit the lights. The house at 1938 Cactus Lane was charred and collapsed in the back. The fire had gutted it days ago, but the front porch still stood, hanging on by rusted nails and chipped wood. The wind blew, through empty windows like ghosts whispering old secrets. Jake pushed open the front door. Rex moved ahead of him, nose low, tail stiff. Inside, ash covered everything: toys, papers, a broken photo frame, and something else: a trapdoor. Rex found it first, his paws scratching at the edges. Jake yanked it open. A steep wooden stairwell descended into pitch black. He flicked on his flashlight. The basement was a storage cellar, but tucked into the corner was a child's mattress. A filthy one. Chains bolted to the wall, scratches, crayon marks, a crude drawing, a boy and a dog. Jake's stomach churned. "This is where he was kept," he whispered. A muffled sound made him spin around, hand on his gun. Then a voice. "Don't shoot." A figure stepped from the shadows at the far side of the cellar. A man in his 60s, unshaven, wearing a sheriff's jacket. "Who the hell are you?" Jake demanded. The man raised his hands. "Name's Tom Rudd. I used to be county sheriff. Retired last year. That house belonged to my niece." "Your niece?" "Melissa Connors. She died in the fire, but she wasn't right." Jake's heart pounded. "Was Jay her kid?" Tom shook his head. "Number she took him. Said he was special. That he spoke to shadows. I reported her. Nobody listened." Jake took a step forward. "Where is Jay now?" "I saw him. He came back last night. He buried something near the fence line. Looked like a toy." Jake sprinted outside, Rex at his heels. Near the property's edge, under a twisted juniper, was a freshly dug patch of dirt. He dropped to his knees and pulled back the earth. A small tin box. Inside, more drawings. One of them showed a black SUV, a face behind the wheel, flames licking the windows. Another, of a man with a badge and a scar on his cheek. Jake blinked. He knew that face. It belonged to Captain Wallace Bray, Jake's own commanding officer. And suddenly, everything made sense. Jay wasn't just running from trauma, he was running from someone still in power. Jake turned to Rex. "We have to find him, now." Rex barked once, sharp and urgent, and together they ran. The response came back garbled. Jake didn't wait. "I'm not leaving you here," he said to both of them. With calm, calculated movements, he managed to coax the boy out, never separating him from the dog. The shepherd, later identified through microchip as REX, followed every step, never growling, never wavering, just watching, guarding. At St. Elmo's Community Hospital, the boy underwent emergency care. No internal injuries, just dehydration, exposure, and severe mutism, likely from trauma. He hadn't spoken a word since arriving. Jake sat outside the pediatric wing, tapping his boot rhythmically against the tile floor. His instincts told him something was off. This wasn't just a neglect case. The vehicle had been scrubbed clean, no fingerprints, no personal effects, nothing but the boy, the dog, and a pile of shredded duct tape on the floorboard. Dr. Emily Carter approached, holding a clipboard in one hand and a cup of hospital coffee in the other. "He's not talking?" Jake asked. She shook her head. "Nothing. He won't even respond to his name. We think he might be selectively mute, the kind that develops from witnessing extreme trauma. But the strange part. Jake looked up. He won't let go of the dog. We tried to separate them for an X-ray. The boy panicked. Rex growled, loud enough to freeze my nurse mid-step. It was like he knew exactly what the boy needed. Jake rubbed his jaw. You ever seen a bond like that before? Emily paused. Not like this. Not this immediate. This isn't just companionship, it's protection. They've been through something together. Jake stood. Can I talk to him? Emily motioned toward the glass window. You can try, but don't expect much. Inside the recovery room, the boy lay curled on the hospital bed, Rex resting at his feet. Jake stepped in slowly. No uniform, just a hoodie and jeans. He crouched beside the bed. Hey, champ, remember me? I'm Jake. Nothing. Jake looked at Rex. You're one hell of a partner, you know that? The shepherd tilted his head. You saved that boy's life, maybe more than once. Still no reaction. Jake sighed and turned to leave. But then, just before he touched the door handle, he heard it. A soft sound. So faint he almost missed it. Jake turned. The boy had sat up. His tiny hand was on Rex's head. He looked right at Jake and opened his mouth. No more than a whisper, a single word. Friend. Jake's knees nearly gave out. Emily gasped from the hallway. Nurses froze mid-step. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, but it was real. The boy had spoken, and the first word he chose, the word that shattered the silence, was for REX. Jake's eyes blurred with tears. He wasn't sure if they were from relief, shock, or something deeper. All he knew was that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The trail led Jake and Rex into the forest bordering the outskirts of Langford. Jay's footprints, barely visible in the early snow, weaved along the tree line, headed toward an old ranger outpost long since abandoned. Jake's phone had no service. They were off-grid now. Rex trotted ahead, his snout low and ears alert. His pace quickened near a broken fence, stopping at a torn piece of flannel snagged on wire. Jake recognized it. Jay had been wearing that shirt the day he arrived. Good boy, Jake whispered. We're close. Inside the outpost, the air was heavy with mildew and silence. Dust clung to everything. But on the floor near the fireplace, a few items lay neatly arranged. A plastic water bottle, a bag of trail mix, and Jay's drawing tin. Jake slowly opened the tin. More crayon sketches, this time with symbols. A sun with an eye, a building with tall steps, a man in uniform standing over a woman and a dog. REX whined. Jake glanced at the last drawing and froze. The man with the scar. Captain Bray. But the woman! It wasn't Melissa Connors. It was someone Jake hadn't seen in years. Claire Donovan, a whistleblower and youth counselor who vanished during an investigation into illegal child trafficking near Fort Logan. Jake's hands shook as he flipped through old case notes on his phone, pulling up Claire's missing persons file. There it was. File closed without resolution. Claimed to be suicide. No body. Jake remembered raising questions back then, and being told to back off. His gut twisted. I think we've been looking at this all wrong, Jake said aloud. Rex growled suddenly, moving to the door. From the shadows outside, a twig snapped. Jake ducked instinctively and pulled his service weapon. Who's there? He shouted. A voice called out, It's me! Don't shoot! Jay emerged from behind the brush, his face pale and smudged with dirt. But there was no fear in his eyes this time. He walked straight up to REX and hugged him tightly. Then he looked at Jake and said, soft, raspy, but unmistakable, Claire's alive. Jake's breath caught. It was the first time Jay had spoken. You know where she is? Jake asked gently. Jay nodded. He took her. Who's he? Jay didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a tiny USB drive. Jake stared at it, confused. "She told me to hide this if anything happened." Jay whispered, "It's got everything." Rex stood rigid, eyes locked on the tree line. A shadow moved. Jake yanked Jay behind him, just as a bullet ripped through the cabin wall. "Down!" Jake yelled, diving with the boy behind the stone hearth. Another shot cracked, splintering wood inches from his face. Rex lunged through the open doorway and disappeared into the dark. "Rex!" Jake called, but the gunfire stopped. And moments later, Rex returned, blood on his muzzle, but unharmed. Jake grabbed the USB and stuffed it in his vest. "We need to move now." As they sprinted into the woods, Jay clutched Jake's hand tightly for the first time. Behind them, smoke rose from the outpost. Someone had torched it. Evidence was gone, all except what Jake now carried in his pocket and what Jay carried in his memories. Back in the cruiser, Jake slid into the driver's seat, heart racing. He turned to Jay. "We're going to someone who can help, someone who doesn't scare easy." Jay looked unsure. "You trust REX, right?" Jay nodded. "Then trust me." And as they pulled away into the night, Rex curled in the back seat beside Jay, never taking his eyes off the road behind them. Detective Jake Lawson pulled into the quiet cul-de-sac just after midnight. The house at the end, with its dark windows and trimmed hedges, belonged to Deputy U.S. Marshal Elena Cruz, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in nearly 5 years. Jay sat in the back seat, dozing off with Rex's massive head resting across his lap. The boy's hand gently stroked behind Rex's ears, the rhythm slowing with sleep. It was the most peace Jake had seen on that child's face. Elena answered the door in sweatpants and a tank top, her badge clipped to the inside of the doorframe. Her eyes flicked from Jake to the boy to Rex. "Jesus, Jake, what the hell are you mixed up in?" "Something dirty, and way too big for just local law enforcement." He held up the USB. "This changes everything." Inside, Elena booted up her secure laptop, while Jay curled up on the couch next to Rex. Jake filled her in quickly. The files, the drawing of Claire, the ambush at the outpost. When Elena opened the USB, a password prompt appeared. Jay stood quietly, then stepped forward. He typed. The screen blinked, then loaded. It was a video. Claire Donovan sat in a bare room. Her eyes were swollen, her voice shaky but defiant. "They said I saw too much. I did. But I won't be quiet. The man behind all of it is not just a name. He's protected." She took a breath. Captain Ronald Bray. Langford PD badge 1641. Jake's stomach dropped. Elena froze. "The timestamp on the video? 3 weeks ago." "She's alive." Jake muttered. "She's still out there." The video continued. Claire spoke of documents she'd uploaded, hidden locations, names. Each one checked a box in Jake's memory. Suppressed leads, cases closed prematurely, foster kids placed in private group homes that didn't exist 6 months later. And Bray's name? On transfer orders, case closures, internal memos, always in the background, never directly involved. Jay leaned against Rex, his hand gripping the fur like a lifeline. Then Elena scrolled to the folder labeled Safe House 7. Inside, floor plans, guard rotations, encrypted ledgers. "I've seen this before," Jake said. "That building was condemned. Bray used it for training years ago." "You think he's keeping Claire there?" Elena asked. Jake nodded. "She's leverage. If this blows wide open, she's his insurance." "Then we get her out," Elena said. They agreed on a plan. Hit the safe house before dawn, while Bray's guard detail would be thin. Elena would pull 2 trusted federal agents. Jake would bring Rex. Jay, he would stay behind, safe. But Jay didn't agree. "No," he said suddenly. "She trusted me. I know how to get in." Jake stared at him. "You said one word 3 days ago. Now you're ready to run into a fortified building? Jay lifted his sleeve. On his forearm, drawn in smudged ink, was a diagram. A tunnel entrance beneath the hill, behind the service shed. The drawings matched the old blueprints Elena had just decrypted. She showed me the escape way, Jay said quietly. Said if she ever stopped coming back, I should use it. Jake looked at Elena. She gave a slight nod. They didn't like it, but they didn't have time to argue. At 4:11 a.m., Jake stood, with Rex and Elena's team outside the hidden tunnel entrance. Jay waited by the entrance, nerves taut, eyes darting. Rex was already keyed in. His ears were high, his stance forward, his body trembling not in fear, but anticipation. He was ready to protect, to hunt. Elena whispered, 3 minutes. Jake gripped her shoulder. We go in quiet, no heroics. Inside the tunnel it was cold and damp. Rex led, muzzle twitching at every scent, claws barely making a sound on the concrete floor. Then he stopped. Jake raised his hand. They listened. Voices ahead. 1 male, 2 guards. Jake moved. Rex followed with surgical precision, darting forward, then crouching low behind a stack of crates. 1 guard turned just as REX launched. The takedown was brutal and fast. No shots fired. The second man turned to run, but Jake tackled him mid-stride. Seconds later, they were in. Claire was there, shackled to a pipe, barely conscious. Her eyes fluttered open as Rex nudged her hand. She smiled weakly. Rex, she murmured. Jake picked the lock with trembling fingers. Claire, you're safe now. Then a click echoed behind him. A gun. Drop it, a voice growled. Captain Bray stood at the entrance, but before Jake could move, Jay appeared behind him. Small, silent, but brave. Let her go, Jay said. Bray turned, distracted for just a heartbeat. It was enough. Rex lunged. The gun went off, ricocheting into the ceiling. Then silence. Bray lay pinned, bleeding from the shoulder. Jay was shaking, but he didn't cry. Claire took his hand and whispered, You saved me. Jake looked at the boy, no longer silent, no longer broken. And Rex, still standing guard, always loyal, always watching. The plan had been airtight. Get Claire out, slip back through the tunnel, and vanish before Bray's reinforcements arrived. But no plan survives first contact, especially not with a traitor in the ranks. Rex was leading the way through the tunnel, Claire leaning heavily on Jake, her steps shaky but determined. Elena brought up the rear, her sidearm drawn and eyes scanning every shadow. Jay held a flashlight steady, though his knuckles were white around the grip. Halfway through the passage, the lights flickered, then died. A metallic clank echoed behind them. Gate sealed. Elena swore. That wasn't mechanical failure. Someone just locked us in. Jake cursed under his breath, adrenaline spiking. He turned to Claire. How many exits? Just the main one, she said, breathing ragged. Unless the blast doors are opened from the outside, we're trapped. REX stiffened, ears rotating. A low growl vibrated in his throat. Movement, Jake muttered. We're not alone. 3 shadows emerged from the far end of the tunnel. Tactical gear, silencers, no insignias, mercenaries. Jake shoved Jay behind a column and dropped to 1 knee. Elena didn't hesitate. She fired the first shot. The fight was chaos in echo. Muzzle flashes lit the tunnel in strobe. Rex darted through the shadows like a ghost, attacking with precision. One of the mercs screamed as the German shepherd took him down by the throat. The others scattered, trying to regain advantage, but the narrow tunnel offered no space. Claire collapsed beside the wall, coughing blood. Jake pulled her behind a beam and pressed a bandage to her side. You're going to make it, he lied. Stay with me. Rex returned to Jake's side, blood on his fur. He wasn't hurt, yet. but his eyes locked onto the final mercenary standing. Then Jay moved. Out from the shadows, the boy lifted a brick-sized radio unit, one Claire had dropped earlier. He smashed it against the wall panel just as sparks exploded. The lights flickered back on. The blast doors hissed. The emergency failsafe had been triggered. The tunnel was open. Jake grabbed Claire and shouted, "Go!" Rex didn't wait. He herded Jay forward, nipping his side as if to say, "Faster, now." Elena covered them from behind, dropping the last mercenary with a double tap. They burst out into the early morning fog. A chopper hovered in the distance. Not police. Private. Bray wasn't done. A black SUV skidded into view, tires screaming. Jake raised his weapon, then stopped. Behind the wheel was someone he didn't expect. Officer Travis Moore, from Langford PD, a rookie, a kid Jake had once trained. Moore stepped out, hands raised. "I saw the file. I know what Bray's done." Jake hesitated. Elena moved to cover him, voice low. "You trust him?" Rex stepped forward, sniffed the air near Moore, and did something rare. He wagged his tail. Jake nodded. "Let's move." They loaded Claire into the SUV. Moore took the wheel. Rex jumped in last, scanning the horizon one last time before the door slammed shut. The SUV peeled off down a gravel path toward the safe house Elena had prepared. Inside, Claire faded in and out of consciousness. "I left something," she murmured. Jake leaned closer. "In the ledger, there's a name, a girl. She was trafficked to someone high up. If we find her, we find them all." Jake's pulse quickened. "Who?" Claire's lips barely moved. "Madeline." Cross Elena's eyes widened. "I know that name. That's the senator's daughter. She disappeared 5 years ago. Everyone said it was drugs, overdose." Claire shook her head faintly. "No, she's alive." Rex placed his paw gently on her arm, anchoring her. Jay reached over, fingers trembling, and touched Rex's shoulder. Then, softly, he spoke. "We'll find her." Jake's heart caught in his throat. Jay had just said a full sentence. Elena blinked. "Did he just—" Jake turned around. Jay met his eyes, confident, steady. Then he spoke again. "Rex showed me how." Jake smiled, not just with his mouth, but from somewhere deep in his gut. Hope, finally, after years of silence and shadows. But the celebration didn't last. Elena's burner phone lit. Up. Unknown number. A single message. "You brought her back. That was your last mistake." Jake stared at the screen. The war wasn't over, and they'd just made themselves the next target. The safe house on Old Pine Road was a run-down hunting cabin, hidden behind a thicket of leafless oaks. Inside, it smelled of cedar and gun oil. Jake paced the room, while Elena cleaned blood off her shoulder. Jay sat silently in the corner, Rex lying protectively at his feet. Claire was stable, but just barely. Grace had patched her up over video, guiding Jake and Elena through a crude but effective field surgery. She was resting now, but her cryptic words haunted the room. "Madeline Cross," Elena repeated quietly. "If that's true, we're not just dealing with local corruption anymore." She was declared dead. Jake said, "Overdose in Miami. Body was cremated within a week. No autopsy, no press photos. Her father, Senator Cross, refused a public funeral." Elena tossed a burner phone onto the table. "That screams cover-up." Rex suddenly stood, ears perked. A crunch of gravel outside. Jake grabbed his rifle. "We've got company." Rex bolted to the door, growling low in his throat. Jake crept toward the window and peeked through the slats. A black SUV, same model Bray used. Only this one had diplomatic plates. "Back room," Jake ordered. "Now." Jay froze. Rex nudged him gently, guiding him behind the sofa. Elena took up position by the back door, gun cocked. The knock came, soft but firm. Jake opened it a crack. A woman stood there, late 40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She held up a badge. Agent Felton, Homeland Security. I'm here about the boy and the dog. Jake didn't budge. Got a warrant? Number, but I have clearance. She handed him a flash drive. You're in over your head. That girl in there, Claire, isn't just some victim. She was working undercover. You just blew her cover and lit a match under a hornet's nest. Jake didn't move. She said Madeline Cross is alive. Felton nodded grimly. And she's right. That changed everything. Inside, Claire had woken. She struggled to sit up. She's in Dovetail, a private psychiatric facility in Wyoming. Off the books, funded through shell charities. No one gets in without Cross's blessing. Felton crossed her arms. Bray's just a foot soldier. Cross is the architect. Trafficking, blackmail, disappearances, all buried under national security. And now you've stirred it. Jay emerged from behind the couch. He walked right up to Felton, unafraid, and held up a drawing, a crude sketch of a girl in a hospital bed behind bars. She's crying, he whispered. Felton blinked. He drew this? Jake nodded. He doesn't talk much, but he remembers everything. Jay looked down at RX. He showed me. The agent knelt down, eye level with Jay. You're special, kid. Elena broke in. So what now? Felton stood. We move. Tonight. I'll get you inside Dovetail, but once you're in, there's no backup. No jurisdiction. You'll be ghosts. Jake met her eyes. We've been ghosts before. They drove through the night in 2 unmarked vehicles. Elena stayed with Claire, who had insisted on coming despite her injuries. Jay rode with Jake and Rex, curled up in the back seat, whispering stories to the dog. Rex never took his eyes off the road. They reached Dovetail just before dawn. From the outside, it looked like a spa retreat. Inside, it was a fortress. Felton handed Jake a stolen access badge. You've got 30 minutes. Find Madeline. Get her out. Don't trust anyone. Jake turned to Jay. Stay in the van, no matter what happens. Jay shook his head. Number, I'm going with Rex. Jake hesitated. Rex sat by Jay, unflinching. They were a team now. Inside, the halls were too clean, too quiet. The staff all smiled too hard. Jake and Elena split up. Rex guided Jay down a side corridor, nose twitching. They passed rooms labeled only by numbers. Some were empty. Others had shadows inside. Faces turned toward the sound of footsteps. No voices, just silence. Then REX stopped. Room 12. Jay placed his hand on the door. Inside, a girl, early 20s, pale, gaunt, sat staring out a barred window. Madeline Cross. She looked at Jay. He looked at her, and then softly he said, We're here. Madeline blinked. Then she whispered, REX. The dog moved forward, slow, careful. He licked her hand once. She broke. The girl collapsed into tears. Elena appeared at the door. We need to go now. Alarms sounded. They know. Jake barked through the radio. Gunfire erupted down the hall. Rex jumped in front of Jay, snarling. Move! Elena yelled, pulling Madeline to her feet. The escape was chaos. Smoke, shots, a flashbang. Jay got separated, crawling under a gurney. Rex stayed with him. They found an exit, an old laundry chute. Jake was already outside, bleeding but upright. One by one they jumped, into the cold, into freedom. REX was last. He looked back once, eyes locked on the security guard who hesitated, then nodded and turned away. Someone had just turned. The good kind of twist. They had Madeline. But now the real war would begin. Snow crunched underfoot as Jake carried Madeline to the van. Her body was weak, but her eyes were wide open now. She kept looking around like she couldn't believe the sky still existed. Elena covered them from behind, blood seeping through her jacket. Felton was gone, vanished during the firefight, her fate unknown. Claire was already in the back seat, giving Madeline water. Jay climbed in beside her, pressing close without a word. Rex jumped in after, licking Madeline's trembling fingers. She smiled for the first time in years. They drove in silence for almost an hour, the sun rising over the frozen highway. Jake's hands trembled on the wheel. His voice cracked once when he asked if Madeline could remember any names. She nodded, murmured something about a vault, a name, Riverton. It meant nothing to Jake, but it meant everything to Jay. He sat up suddenly, eyes wide. He grabbed a crayon from Claire's sketchbook and started drawing. Fast, frantic strokes. Elena turned in her seat, watching him. Jay held up the finished sketch. A logo. A bridge, split down the center, with the letters RVC underneath. Madeline gasped. That's it, that's the vault. Vault? Jake asked. A digital archive. Madeline explained. It's where they store the recordings. Confessions, proof of blackmail, it's insurance. Where is it? In the basement of the Riverton Club. Private. Members only. Owned by Cross's cousin. Every senator in 3 states has walked through that door. Elena muttered. Of course they have. Jake turned on the radio scanner. They were being hunted. State police had put out a BOLO. Homeland claimed the van was stolen. Bray's face was nowhere on the alert. Just Jake, Elena, and the boy. They pulled off the highway and drove into the backwoods of Montana. An old ranger outpost offered shelter for a few hours. Elena stitched up her side. Jake helped Claire change her bandages. Rex stayed with Jay, watching every shadow like he expected them to grow teeth. That night, Jake stepped outside to make a call. Grace, he said softly. If we go in, we might not come out. Then you better make it count, she replied. I'll cover the story. I've got friends at the Tribune. Just give me the files. You're still amazing, Jake murmured. Just come back. He hung up and turned to find Jay standing behind him. The boy looked up, held out a folded piece of paper. It was a map. Crude but accurate. Layout of the Riverton Club. Jay had drawn it from memory. He's been there, Jake said, stunned. Elena joined them, probably during one of the fundraisers. Political families love to parade their tragedies. Claire came out next, holding Madeline. We go tomorrow. No more hiding. Morning brought storm clouds and sirens in the distance. The Riverton Club stood on a hill outside Bozeman. Gated, guarded, marble pillars like a courthouse of the damned. They parked in the woods and approached on foot. Jay led the way. Rex stayed close, ears twitching, nose twitching. The back entrance was unguarded. They slipped inside. Carpet, crystal chandeliers, laughter from upstairs, downstairs, silence. The vault was protected by biometric lock. Madeline stepped forward. Her fingerprint worked. Inside was a sleek server room. Claire plugged in a portable drive. Screens lit up. Recordings. Dozens. Names, voices, crimes, Cross, Bray, even a few judges. Jake stared at it all. And then the door slammed shut behind them. Bray. Alive. Holding a pistol. You should have died in that fire. He sneered at Claire. She stood tall. Guess I'm harder to kill than you, thought Jake, moved slow, angling toward him. Bray noticed. Don't, he warned. Jay stood frozen behind the console, and Rex, silent, steady, crept behind Bray's blind side. Bray leveled the gun at Jay. And that's when it happened. Jay spoke. No. One word, clear, loud, and filled with something that stopped everyone cold. Bray turned in shock. Rex lunged. The pistol flew from Bray's hand as Rex brought him to the ground, jaws clamping down on his arm. Screams echoed through the vault. Jake tackled Bray, disarmed him fully, cuffed him with zip ties from his belt. Jay stood frozen. Madeline walked over to him. You said something, she whispered. He nodded. Elena watched in awe. Jay, she said gently, what made you speak? He pointed. At Rex. And then, through tears, said a second word. Friend. Jake had to turn away. His throat was tight. Even Rex seemed to pause, tail wagging slightly, like he knew the boy had just crossed a threshold no one else could. The footage was uploaded. The files sent to Grace. The world was about to change. But in that tiny vault, filled with secrets and sins, only one thing mattered. A boy had found his voice, and a dog had helped him do it. The press conference happened less than 48 hours after the data dump. Grace had leaked everything to the Tribune and 5 other outlets, uploading encrypted files to a public server with detailed metadata, voice transcripts, payment trails, video footage of trafficking deals, and more. The fallout was instant. By morning, headlines screamed, "Senators caught in child trafficking cover-up. Riverton Club exposed. Sheriff Bray linked to secret vault." Inside a downtown safe house, Jake, Claire, Elena, and the kids watched it unfold on a cracked television screen. Rex lay beside Jay, his head on the boy's lap as Jay gently brushed his fur with a silent, focused calm. He hadn't stopped speaking since that night in the vault. Not a lot, but enough to stun them all. Mostly to Rex, mostly words like good, safe, and stay. He's holding onto the dog like an anchor, Claire whispered, tears in her eyes. Because Rex doesn't expect anything from him. Jake said. He just is. By the afternoon, warrants had been issued. 2 senators stepped down. 3 police chiefs resigned. Bray was transported in cuffs to federal holding, screaming about a setup, about war, about bloodlines and power. But not everyone was silent. Grace appeared live on Channel 8 News, framed in the courthouse steps with the Tribune's editor beside her. "What happened to these children," she said, "is unforgivable. And without the bravery of whistleblowers and those who risked their lives to expose it, this truth would have stayed buried." She named names, told the story of Claire, of Madeline, of Jake and Elena. But she left out the boy's name, and she never mentioned REX, not yet. Inside the safe house, Claire's phone lit up with dozens of missed calls. So did Jake's, the Department of Justice, Homeland, a retired FBI liaison. Even the president's press office left a message. They didn't answer. Instead, Elena picked up an old prepaid phone. She dialed a single number. A voice answered. "Unit 1. It said. She didn't hesitate. "It's done. The vault's been released. We need a clean corridor out. 5 people. 1 dog, no press, no questions." The line went silent for a moment. Then, "Understood. Be at Ravenfield Airstrip in 2 hours. You'll have escort." The ride to the airstrip was quiet. Jay fell asleep on Claire's shoulder. Rex snored gently, curled up in the trunk space. The van passed billboards, police roadblocks, camera crews, but no one stopped them. At the airfield, a grey Cessna waited. Unmarked. Piloted by a woman in tactical gear who nodded at Elena like they'd served together. Jake handed her a USB drive. "Backup copy. Don't let it die." "I won't," the pilot replied. Claire looked around. "Where are we going?" The pilot smiled. "Someplace where no one knows your name, but everyone knows what loyalty looks like." Jay stepped forward, tugging on Jake's sleeve. "Is Rex coming too?" Jake crouched, looked him in the eye. "What do you think, buddy?" Jay turned to Rex. "Come." Rex stood, stretched, and trotted over like there was never any doubt. As they boarded, Elena paused at the steps. She looked back. A black SUV had pulled up. From it stepped Senator Whitlow. He raised a hand. Elena narrowed her eyes. Jake whispered, "Friend or foe?" "Neither," she said. "He's the future watching us leave." The plane lifted into the sky. Below, America burned with questions and fury. Above, in a cabin filled with exhausted survivors, one boy pressed his forehead to the cold window and whispered another word. "Free." Jake closed his eyes. His hand found Rex's thick fur. "We did it, old boy. We really did." And Rex, sensing the weight finally lifting from his partner's shoulders, let out a low, contented sigh. Justice wasn't finished, but for the first time, they had a chance to live. The sun rose soft and gold over the quiet hills of Pine Haven, a small sanctuary town 2 states away from where the firestorm had erupted. Here, there were no news vans, no camera flashes, just trees, wind, and the gentle rustle of peace. Jay sat on a wooden porch, a crayon in one hand and a worn notebook in the other. He was drawing again, his strokes still shaky, but bold. He'd drawn a large dog, ears perked, tongue out, tail wagging mid-air. Above the dog's head, written in carefully printed letters, was the name, REX. Inside the nearby cabin, Jake finished his coffee as Claire prepped breakfast, humming softly. Elena was already on the satellite phone, checking in with the silent network that had helped smuggle them out. But there were no more threats. Not today. REX lay near Jay on the porch, eyes half closed, ears flicking at birdsong. He hadn't left Jay's side once since the escape, as if knowing this child still lived on the edge of breaking. "He talks more now," Claire whispered to Jake as they watched through the screen door. "But not to us." Jake smiled faintly. "He doesn't need to. He's saying everything to REX that afternoon. Something unexpected happened. A dusty blue pickup rolled into the gravel path. A tall woman stepped out, early 50s, blazer over jeans, eyes sharp as glass. She didn't carry a microphone, just a leather-bound journal and a handheld recorder. "My name's Nancy," she said softly. "I'm not with any news channel. I run a foundation. I lost a child once. She never spoke either." They watched her. No one moved. "I heard your story," she continued. "Or pieces of it. I don't want interviews. I want to help build a place, for kids like him, for dogs like RX. I want people to see what healing really looks like." Elena finally stepped forward. "You'd build it in his name." Nancy looked at the porch. Jay stood there, holding the notebook out toward her. Rex was by his side, upright and calm. "His name," Jay said quietly, voice clear, certain. Nancy blinked. "REX," he added. It was only his 5th word ever spoken aloud, but it landed like thunder. They began construction 6 months later. The Rex Center for Healing and Rescue became a sanctuary for traumatized children and retired working dogs. Therapists, veterans, teachers, volunteers from around the country came to help. Not out of pity, but because they believed. Jay became the quiet ambassador of the center. He never said much, but he walked with purpose, hand always on Rex's collar. Other children followed his lead. Some began to speak. Some simply smiled for the first time in years. Jake and Claire ran day-to-day operations. Elena disappeared back into the field, but her donations kept the lights on. Nancy returned twice a year to update the books. And Rex became legend. Not in a mythical way, but in the way that mattered most. Every child who placed a shaking hand on his back felt steadier. Every veteran who walked him down the trail said the nightmares eased for a while. Rex didn't need medals or parades. He had a job, and he never stopped doing it. One summer evening, Jay sat on a bench beneath the oak tree behind the center. A new boy had just arrived that day, 10 years old, mute, withdrawn. Jay sat beside him, quiet, just as someone once had done for him. Then Jay whispered, "His name's REX. He's safe." The boy didn't speak, but he reached out, and Rex moved forward, laying his head in the boy's lap, same as always, same as forever. If you've made it this far, this story was more than just fiction. It was about hope, about second chances, about a loyal heart on 4 legs that reminded us what healing looks like. Do you have a story? Like this? A moment when a dog, maybe your dog, changed everything? We'd love to hear it. Hit that follow, leave a comment, and join the German Shepherd community. Because loyalty like Rex's should never be forgotten.